and welcome to the second session on getting started with Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. If you look at the entire webinar series, I believe this would be the seventh or eighth session, but specific to Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, this is part two. So if you haven't had a chance to see the part one, please visit my YouTube channel and you could find the recording for part one there. So with that, let's get started. So a little bit about myself. So my name is Vignesh Ganeshan. I work as an enterprise architect and a technology strategist. I'm also a Microsoft MVP and MCT. So I've been in the industry for almost close to 13 plus years, dealing with Microsoft 365, Microsoft Azure, and also Microsoft Defender and Microsoft Purview. So that's all about myself. So Samik, over to you to introduce yourself.
Thank you, Vignesh, and myself, Samik Roy. I'm another security MVP based out of India and MCT as well. Been an author for a book on KQL and mostly focusing on cloud security. And we both are here to present you some wonderful demos on Defender. Over to you, Vignesh.
All right. All right. So let's get started. I'm going to bring up my slides here. Okay. So this is something which I talk in every session because I just want to make sure that if you're somebody who's seeing our this video for the very first time, I want to make sure that you're understanding the expectations of this webinar series. So the targeted audience, as I said, you could be M365 admins, architects, or you could be somebody who comes from a cloud background. So maybe you're a cloud engineer, maybe you're coming from an Azure background, so you're a cloud engineer and a cloud architect, or maybe you're somebody who comes from IT security background, right? So in that case, uh, you know, whatever background you come from, the bare minimum expectation is you should have a decent amount of understanding of Microsoft 365 or Microsoft Azure, right? So because this webinar is designed for somebody who has a decent understanding of Microsoft 365 or Azure, because we do not plan to cover the basics of M365 or Azure in this webinar series. All right, so moving on, the end goal, as you can see in the slide, so the end goal of this webinar session is to make sure that you get yourself familiarized with Microsoft Defender XDR products, the implementation methods, licensing, and best practices. So that's what we'll be focusing majorly on this entire webinar series. So finally, what are the key takeaways? We want to make sure that you walk out of this entire webinar series making sure that you have a good understanding of Microsoft Defender XDR as a whole, and also all the individual products that are part of the Microsoft Defender XDR suite. We also want to make sure that you understand why Microsoft XDR is important for an organization which has cloud footprints. We also want you to understand that Microsoft Defender XDR is not something which is only specific to Microsoft Cloud alone. Maybe you're a Google shop, maybe you're an AWS shop, right? You could still make use of Microsoft Defender XDR to secure your cloud footprint. So those would be the key takeaways. So with that, let's keep moving on. And how do we plan to run this entire webinar series? So we did a I think we are at the seventh or eighth session today. So we've done the introductory stuff. We've spoken briefly about Microsoft Defender for Office 365. So now we are talking about Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. Then we plan to talk about Microsoft Defender for Identity, and then we'll be covering Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps as well. So this entire so-called webinar series is going to be like 15 to 18 sessions, maybe. Uh, as we start to talk more and more, if at all we feel that a particular session should be dedicated to a particular topic, we would do that. Or maybe there could be sessions wherein in one single session we are trying to cover 2 to 3 topics. So the topic would totally demand how much sessions we need to do for that. These will be bi-weekly sessions on Saturdays at 6 p.m. IST. And all these sessions will be recorded and it will be shared in my YouTube channel. So if you want to go back and view the recording, so that's the URL where you can go and see the session recordings. So each session we are planning to do it for 60 minutes. Right? And the first 15 minutes of this would be for the session in itself. That will be a detailed presentation, and Samik will be doing the demo of whatever I'm talking about. And the last 10 minutes will be more for the Q&A. And at the end of each session, we'll be, presenting the QR code for an MS form. We want you to scan that, and it's more of a survey, and also whatever questions you want to ask to us, right? Maybe it could be specific to that very session that you attended or viewed, or maybe something specific to Microsoft Defender XDR as a whole. So whatever it is, you can put in your questions there. We will talk in detail about that. We will take those questions and we will discuss in detail about that in the next upcoming sessions. All right. So what is the agenda for today's session, right? So I want to keep it very simple. Uh, I'll just be giving an overview of a recap of the previous session, right? So the last session we spoke about the Plan 1 capabilities of Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, wherein I also mentioned that we want to park a separate session only for attack surface reduction because it's a huge topic in itself. So today's session will be completely dedicated to attack surface reduction. So that's what we are planning to do. There will also be a deep dive demo on the various attack surface reduction capabilities, and then I'll also be sharing some useful links, and then finally we'll have a Q&A. What I want to tell upfront is attack surface reduction in itself is a very huge topic. And what we are planning to do in this demo is try to simplify it because we want to make sure that we are trying to squeeze it into this one single session. But after this session, I urge you all to go and read in detail about all the different capabilities, the configurations, and everything that is possible using attack surface reduction because it is not possible for us to go through all the various features and capabilities of attack surface detection. We'll be spending hours and hours talking about it, and our webinar series is not designed for that, right? So what I'm planning to say is yes, we'll be talking about attack surface detection briefly, but not we won't be covering as much as possible because the topic in itself is so vast and huge. So just a quick recap of what we covered in the last session. As I said, the last session was completely dedicated to the Microsoft Defender for Endpoint Plan 1 capabilities. So we spoke about the next gen protection capabilities, which includes your anti-malware and antivirus. Then we spoke about the manual response actions. Then the centralized management, wherein Samik did a complete demo on the complete Microsoft Defender console. We looked at all the different cards and stuff. Then also the security reports, the various reports that are available specific to Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, then the API support, and then we also spoke about what are the different operating systems Microsoft Defender for Endpoint can support. Because it's not something which is only limited to Windows, because it's a Microsoft product, it can also support your Android operating system, Mac, and also Linux to a certain extent. So in today's session, as I said, our core focus is going to be completely on attack surface reduction. So let's get started. So what is attack surface reduction, right? As the name itself says, when I say attack surface, so it basically means that these are the areas which are prone to attack in your environment, so specific to endpoints, right? So as the name itself says, when I say attack surface reduction, how you can reduce this? That's what it basically means. So the attack surface reduction set of capabilities provides the first line of defense in the stack by ensuring configuration settings are properly set and exploit mitigation techniques are applied. The capabilities resist attacks and exploitation. It's just a bunch of words there, but what it simply means is uh, there are a lot of attacks coming your way, and all these things that you see, that these are the ones which are easily prone to attack, the ones that you're seeing in the slide. So what are the capabilities which MDE offers so that you can reduce this? That's what basically attack surface protection is all about. And it has a lot of capabilities, as you can see in the slide. We have the ASR rules, then you have hardware-based isolation, application control, exploit protection, network protection, controlled folder access, device control, web protection, and ransomware protection. Now, rather than me going and talking in detail about each and every single capability, I have a video from Microsoft where they sort of walk you through all these different capabilities at a very high level. So I'm going to play that video so that you can make sense out of what all these different capabilities has to offer. So let me bring that up. All right.
This video describes attack surface reduction in Microsoft Defender for Endpoint so you can better understand how it prevents attacks. Attack surface reduction is hardening the places where a threat is likely to attack, closing gaps to reduce the risks. Microsoft Defender for Endpoint has numerous features to do this without blocking users' productivity, and you can customize them to fit your organization. Use Microsoft Endpoint Manager or other management tools to turn them on and configure them. You can even audit these features first without enforcing them to understand how they might impact your environment. In this video, we'll look at some of these attack surface reduction capabilities, starting with hardware-based isolation. Hardware-based isolation protects systems from advanced attacks while helping to keep users productive. it isolates untrusted websites and PDF documents in a lightweight container, separate from the rest of the system. You define what is trusted, everything else is not. If the website or PDF turns out to be malicious, it's limited to the sandbox. Once a user closes the session, the threat is wiped away, along with any damage it might have done inside the container. The Microsoft Defender for Endpoint sensors are part of the container and will report a potential threat back to your console. So, even though the threat is gone, you still have visibility to it. While hardware-based isolation helps to reduce the attack surface area by isolating untrusted websites, application control in Defender for Endpoint can prevent untrusted applications from running. That's next. Trusting everything and blocking apps that prove malicious doesn't work. There's simply too many apps and too little time. A better model is trust nothing until it earns your trust. That's the idea behind application control. You identify which applications you trust, the circle of trust, and application control only allows those applications to run. Don't worry, application control makes defining the circle of trust easy. First, you can trust all apps that have good reputations from Microsoft. Organizations can also automatically trust applications they deploy by using Microsoft Intune or System Center Configuration Manager. Using application control to block untrustworthy applications and allowing it to help you build a circle of trust offers an unprecedented way to reduce the attack surface area. Similarly, controlled folder access prevents untrusted apps from accessing protected folders. That's next. What if malware finds its way around all the other protections onto a machine? Ransomware, for example. Once it's on the machine, it can begin file encryption, holding your files hostage. This is where controlled folder access can help to protect your valuable data. It's very easy. You specify protected folders and only allow trusted apps to access them. Microsoft Defender for Endpoint adds apps to the trusted apps list based on their prevalence and reputation. If an app isn't trusted, controlled folder access blocks it from changing files in the protected folders. Next up, network protection offers a similar type of protection for network connections. Network protection blocks access to low-reputation internet destinations by leveraging Microsoft's intelligence about the threat landscape. It extends Smart Screen to block all outbound traffic to dangerous internet resources by any application, not just Microsoft Edge. Additionally, network protection enables other capabilities like custom IP and URL allow and block lists, endpoint policy enforcement for our integration with Microsoft Cloud App Security, and web protection. Web protection includes web threat protection to harden machines against threats like phishing sites, malware payloads, exploit sites, low reputation websites, and any site you add to the custom indicator list. All this works without a web proxy, by the way, protecting machines whether they're on the corporate network or not. And it reports back to the Microsoft Defender Security Center, so you can use those signals in your investigations. Like many other attack surface reduction features in Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, network protection is super easy to deploy. Just turn it on. Next up, we'll talk about exploit protection. Exploit protection automatically applies exploit mitigation techniques to operating system processes and apps. Data execution prevention and arbitrary code guard are examples of these mitigation techniques. While you can enable exploit protection on an individual machine, you can enable exploit protection at scale by using Microsoft Endpoint Manager. Then, exploit protection reports events and blocks to Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, so you can use them as part of your usual alert investigations. On top of that, Defender for Endpoint offers attack surface reduction rules that give you more granular control over what behaviors applications are allowed. My favorite examples are macros. Macros are very useful for business, but they're commonly used by malware. With attack surface reduction rules, you can generally allow macros, but not allow them to create child processes or download code from the internet. The last capability we want to mention is device control, the ability to control removable media. Coming up next. With device control, security teams can allow or block certain removable devices to prevent threats they might contain. You can get rather granular with this configuration. For example, you can allow or deny write access to all removable disks, or by USB vendor ID. And you can enable direct memory access protection to mitigate DMA attacks, including kernel DMA protection. By using attack surface reduction rules, you can block untrusted or unsigned processes that run from USB. These were just a few of the attack surface reduction capabilities that can help customers reduce the exposure of their machines. You can learn more about attack surface reduction in Microsoft Defender for Endpoint on Microsoft Docs.
All right, so I hope that should have given you a detailed, uh, an in-depth idea of what attack surface reduction is all about, right? It's more of hardening all the different attack surface attack surface stuff which is out there, so that you're securing your environment and all the endpoints and stuff that is there, right? So now it's time for the demo. So I'm going to let Samik showcase couple of things that we saw in attack surface in this particular video. So these are the stuff that we are planning to cover in the demo today. First, we'll be talking about how to configure the different attack surface reduction capabilities, right? So as you can see, ASR rules, hardware-based isolation, exploit protection. So we'll be showing some demos around this. And then we'll also be talking about how you can test the different attack surface reduction capabilities in MD. As you just saw in the video, right? You have something called as an audit mode and a block mode. An audit mode is more around, as itself says, right? It's audit. I mean, which means you're not really letting that happen, wherein you're turning on that policy, but it's not going to block anything. It's just going to be there and audit whatever is happening in the environment, and it's going to report back to you, right? And then we also want to talk about how you can view these attack surface reduction events in the event viewer, and also if at all you want to run some KQL queries, use the advanced hunting capabilities and go about it, we'll be showing that also. And I just want to reiterate once again, this in itself is a very vast topic. We won't be able to do a complete demo on all this, but we'll try to showcase some of these capabilities so that you can get an understanding of what is possible using attack surface reduction. And also, before giving it to Samik for the demo, I want to make sure that you understand that there are different methods available for you to configure ASR capabilities, right? Of course, you got Microsoft Intune, the Microsoft Configuration Manager, Group Policy, PowerShell Commandlets, Mobile Device Management, and Windows Security App. Now, based upon your infrastructure, based upon what best works for your organization, you would choose the one. But in our demo, we are going to focus on Microsoft Intune. But then if your environment is different, you want to do it with group policy, feel free to go ahead and do whatever best suits for you. But I would suggest stick to Microsoft Intune because that's the latest one. It always makes sense to stick to something which is the latest and greatest. So with that, let me hand it over to Samik. So Samik, over to you.
Thank you, Vignesh. And then I will start with sharing my screen. And if you could confirm that you see it.
Coming up. Yes. Yes.
Wonderful. So let me do that. Also, yeah, let me bring up the screen. All right, so just to echo Vignesh here, right? What we have done for this demo is set up an Active Directory environment in Azure, and that there are a couple of virtual machines which are actually tagged, and they are configured and managed and connected with the DC through Microsoft Intune, right? And this is where we are in the Intune homepage. If I click on here now, to start with, right, let's try to look at what exactly the attack surface reduction rules are, and where do we find them if there is an existing. So for that to happen, we use the left navigation and scroll the way to the middle of the navigation, click on endpoint security, and within endpoint security, if you keep coming down in the secondary navigation, we would see attack surface reduction. So once we click on that, as you see, there are reusable settings or summary of the existing policies, right? What I did here is I already created two policies, and I'm going to try to create another one. But these policies are basically the ones which are actually pushed to the virtual machines, and I'm going to show demonstration on that. So if we try to create a policy, let's say, for example, we hit create a policy, the first settings we do And just to highlight here, right? Whatever you're going to do through Intune, because Intune is mostly used for device management, so we can do it through Intune. But having said that, there are PowerShell scripts available to deploy or enable attack surface reduction rule on each and every machine if you want to. Let's say if you are not managing through Intune, or if you have a very small scale of environment, or maybe you're looking for a demo, right? Maybe PowerShell is the best way to look at it. And I'm also going to show you some sort of PowerShell snippet to ensure that the rules are deployed are there, right? Now, the first setting here in the platform settings, what you do is, obviously in our case, we are using mostly Windows 11. So I would like to go with Windows 10, Windows 11, and Windows Server. Once I do that, the next thing it's going to ask, as Vignesh was talking about in his slides, right? There are two things: we can go for attack surface reduction rule, or we can go for device control. But let's start with the attack surface reduction rules here. And once I click on that, you're going to see a little bit of description, what exactly it is. And when you hit create, it's going to go to the next screen asking you for a name. So I would say, let's say demo webinar profile 2, and give some description here, and then go to next. In this is the place where exactly we try to we try to show you all the policies. So for example, block Adobe Reader from creating child processes, because we know that PDF is one of the ways where attacker uses to drop malicious things into your computer or machine. And then we might assume that some file looks PDF and we try to open it, and behind the scene it creates a child process, right? And that might do something else. So in that case, this is the rule which is going to identify and block it. And obviously by default it is non-configured. We can turn it off, we can audit it, we can put on warning, or we can block it. So a few things about audit and block mode. Mainly, initially when we try to deploy any attack surface reduction rule, right, ideally we should be using audit. The reason is audit will not hamper any user experience, because for example, if you have an enterprise scenario, right, where you're trying to deploy or just reduce the attack surface reduction, or apply the rules, then the ideal way is that you deploy in audit mode, and then eventually I'm going to show you those are going to get audited, and we can see them in reports that how those policies or how those rules are basically behaving. Are they good to go? Then actually put in block mode, rather than directly putting in block mode and creating something wrong with the user experience, right? So let's go to audit. So similar to that, we can also do some exclusion for a particular rule, things like that. Coming to some other rules, let's say block processes creation from originating from psx or wmi command. That means someone is trying to run a reverse shell or something like that. Next one is block execution potentially of obfuscated scripts, block persistent through WM event, block Win32 API call from Office macros, because Win32 is one of the major options here. And if it is getting called from Office API, that's not, or Office macros, that's not a good sign. Block Office application from creating executable content. That means, let's say you download a PowerPoint, you download a Word. Behind the scene, it is trying to create executable file, and that can do 100 different things in your system, right? And similar to that, we can also talk about credential stealing from Windows Local Security Authority subsystem, block use or copied tools, block executive file from running if they meet privilege or age or trusted list. Then one of the oldest way is blocking JavaScript or VBScript from launching downloadable execution. So one of the good example is, let's say you hit some website or wherein there is a small JavaScript, right? And on page load itself, that tries to download some exe. So that should be blocked, something like that. Blocking Office communication application from creating child processes. That means if again, coming back to have a Word, PowerPoint, things like that, that is trying to create a child process, it's going to block. And for each and every settings, you're going to get all the options there depending on how you want to configure. Then block Office application from injecting core code into other processes. That's also one of the thing, right? So similar to that, you can and also there's a really interesting thing here: block rebooting machine in safe mode. That means at times things doesn't work, and then attackers use this safe mode to get into your machines, right? So similar to that, you can have all these details, and There is no absolute mandate that you have to have everything configured or even put into audit mode in a single policy. You can have multiple policies, and I'll come to the point that why we can have multiple policies and what's the purpose around that. Then, there are some exclusions we can put in. If we want to put conditional enable controlled access folder, right now it is not configured. If I try to enable it, right, so let's enable it, and then protected folders if you want to configure. So there are, and let me go to this small I sign. It says that there are default things like which Windows understands my documents, my pictures, and things like that. If some processes try to modify something, right, it's gonna control that and block that to happen. And I'm also trying to show you, I'll try to show you a demo that what happens if you don't put it in the right folders. So let's say you have a code folder in a machine, or you have something other folder which you want to protect, right? You don't want them to be encrypted at any point in time. Same thing for folder access. So I'll quickly go to next. And then after we configure all those settings, next is the interesting part, scope. So by default, it's default is basically, go to all right now because it's a very new environment. We don't have any other tags. If we want to have, this is predominantly works on device tags. We can actually tag multiple tag devices. So then once we are done with this, the next thing is assignment. So till now, we are talking about what was the profile was about, what are the policies are part of the profile, what is the scope. The next thing is where we are going to assign. That means we are going to tell Intune that, okay, this is the ASR rule or setup rules, right? These is supposed to do ABC activities, maybe some audit mode, some block mode eventually. Where exactly they put it? They target to one user, they can target to all users, they can target to all devices, right? And also, let's say if you're going for all users, you can also do an exception or exclusions. That means you can really, put right policies for the right people with the right configuration, and you can do your permutation combination if you want to deploy the setup policies. Now, obviously, I'm going to add all devices because there are only few, and then I'm going to go next, right? So if you see, this is going to deploy with Intune turned on. This Intune is going to push all this policy for all the machines where it's connected. Now, in the interest of time, I'm going to go back and show you one of the existing policies, which is basically already there. So if I click on the second one, right, and once a policy is created, what's going to happen is, as you see, right, this policy is deployed to, or actually got into one machine. The reason is the next machine we intentionally turned it off, or we didn't turn it on, basically to make sure that Intune cannot update it, just to show you, right? So then let's say you have multiple devices. We can go inside and click on device attack, assessment status. It basically says that, yeah, both are pending here, right? Now go back here and per setting status, right? How many are successful? So these are the things which are successful out of these policies, right? And these are things which are kind of failure or not didn't happen. You can click on view report to get a detailed report. I'm not going to go right now over there. Coming to the second policy, right? Sorry, I think I should go to the next demo one. So this policy, right? Let's say once a policy is created, that's not set in stone. Obviously, you want to change it, right? So you can change the basics, you can change the assignments, you can change the scopes, and fundamentally, you can change the configuration wherein the exact ASR rules are kind of deployed here. As you see, right? A couple of things are here: warning, a couple of things not configured, right? A few things is basically block and things like that. And I've also done a control access folder that if there is a folder with c/prod, don't do anything to it, right? Um, or kind of protect it. So now this policy is here. Now, next thing I'm going to show is we are going to go to a machine, which is this, right? And then what you're going to do is start with a few things. This machine, right? This machine's wherein is one of the machines. This is called demo VM2, and you saw a couple of policies were successfully deployed to this machine. Now, how do we ensure that like they are actually there? So for that, there is a PowerShell, and obviously the PowerShell is kind of available publicly in Microsoft Learn, and I'm going to run that. So you see the PowerShell is called get hyphen MP preference select attack surface reduction rule IDs rules, right? Rules might not be always here, but let's put only IDs, right? So I'll just take out the rules and just set IDs. So you see there are a couple of IDs which are actually, if you remember that there are certain things in block and certain things are like in audit mode, all the policies are pushed into the system, right? So this basically gives a confirmation that, okay, this is all good here. Now the next thing, right? Okay, we have Intune setup, we have created a few policies depending on our need, and we are also able to see that the machine has consumed or Intune has actually pushed those policies to the machines. Now, it doesn't end there. We also have to verify, right? Or we should be also able to show you that it works. So for that to happen, I'm gonna open up a URL, and again, this is from Microsoft itself. It's one of the demos. So I'm gonna open that. As you see, it's called, this is the URL here, and it gets you a tool called download ASR tool to test it out, right? And after you test it, you can actually, as you see, there's a list of attack surface reduction rules wherein you can set them disabled. And also same thing, instead of disabled, if you put it audit warning or block, that's block gonna happen. Now talking about block mode, one thing you know to keep in mind is whenever we are running Defender as an only antivirus solution, let's say there are other solutions in the market, right? And there are organizations who try to run both. In those cases, you will never be able to achieve something as you know uh, it will be always in the audit mode. You will not be able to run it as a block mode until unless you specify that Defender is the only antivirus for the endpoint, right? Now, let me get back to my downloads here. And as I talked about, right, this is the tool here. So let me try to open the tool. And fundamentally, it is a small Windows application, as you can see. And I'm going to run this. And it's basically simulate certain things, right? As you can see, it is going to some places and it does, and then it kills notepad and does something, and it's going to share that it's blocked it. Let me run it again. And let me specify something here, mail client P, because that's the exact thing I put in here. As you see on the right hand side bottom, right, because there is a ASR rule to say, okay, anything such type comes in, block it. So if you look at the left hand side open, it is saying execute the copy of calc.exe. So calc.exe is not the actual calc within the Windows system. This is basically a malware, right? So if I hit run, you say exploit GLUD has blocked it. That means it didn't run at all, right? That's one of the demos I would like to show. And if I try to go to Defender and let me go to protection history, you're going to see all of them because I have been testing this really for some time right now, right? You can see a list of all the blocked activities. Obviously risk is low, but eventually it gets higher, right? Now this is Defender, right? If you want to get the same thing in event viewer, you can do it as well. So just a moment. So we are right now, as you see in the event viewer, standard structure, application and services. Then within that Microsoft, within that under Microsoft Windows, and within that, I would say we should search for Windows Defender. Let's see if it gives me. Here we go. And WHC operational. Then you get the logs, right? I mean, you don't need to go there, but yeah, there is. If I go to warning, right? As you see, exploit guard has blocked this operation not allowed by IT admin, and you can see it here. It is just for your understand, right? Now, yes, this is something we have seen here in the system and things like that, which is good, and then it technically blocks it, right? Now, let us do something. I have also managed to bypass and download a ransomware exe, right? When I do that, something is going to happen. But before that, let me show you in the PC, right? So if I go to C drive, I have two specific folders. One is demo, you can see, right? And this is a ASR rule which is not set to block mode, right? And I'm going to show you what happens if you don't put the ASR rule in block mode. So it says very important intentional spelling mistake as document. And I'm also going to show you one folder called prod, right? There is also something like same thing, same file copied. Let's go to download, and I'll try to run the test.exe. Yeah, obviously it's this is a very old, right? So I'm gonna close it. It's gonna keep saying that. And then if I go here, right, demo, you see it's encrypted. Obviously there is a thing to decrypt, but the file is gone. It's basically so because the ASR rule is not set to block mode for this particular folder, or this folder is not protected. Now if I go to prod, you see nothing happened here, right? So that's the things which is these are a little bit demo around attack surface reduction rule. Now this is the play what we did within the system. Right now let's see what is the other way to look at it. Now I'll go to now defender, which is again security.microsoft.com, and in the left navigation we will jump onto the report section, and within report section, I'll scroll down a little bit here, and we'd go to attack surface rules, reduction rules report. And obviously in the detections, we're gonna see that I'll say remove all the filters just to make sure that, as you see, there are like different things, blocked, audited, blocked, audited. So coming to the same notion, what Vignesh did say that in the beginning of his presentation, that the ideal way to do things is put things in audit mode, and you can use this console, right, to see that what's being audited and what's the behavior. And you see this is one of the tools I was using, right, asr2.exe, and you can see it here. And demo pc2 is the machine which I was demoing you from. As I have been this thing, doing this for a while, you can see really a good amount of logs here. Now this is a mixed place, right? You see it here audited, you take a decision that, okay, let's turn that into block mode, right? And obviously, because for the demo, there are certain things blocked, you can also see that these are blocked, right? So these are some of the things which can help you understand ASR rule. Now, this is again, which is available with clicks and buttons and things like that. But if you really want to go deeper and do some sort of threat hunting, right? Now, in that case, what you could do is you can also go to advanced hunting. And if you have all these things ran, so what happens is defender, that blocking or creating things goes under a device event table. So what I would do is, let me try to get you another query which is called device event. Action type starts with ASR, and let me run this. Once I run this, okay, close this. You see 59 items. Let me bring the stream a little up. And this is a place, right? And it gives the same data, whatever you saw in report, but really, it's the hunting data and raw data, right? So you can play around with it, and then you can do joining, you can do a threat hunting, threat analysis, and things like that. As you see here, right? I was the person used here. This was my mailbox wherein it got downloaded or try to download certain things, and it has as much detail as possible. So this is basically Outlook ASC, and then it opened from Office, and what exactly happened and things like that, right? So this is the entire flow, I would say, starting from the beginning to the end of ASR rules. And eventually what we should do is, keep doing stuff that, okay, look at the ASR rule, look at the configuration, and then try to deploy always in audit mode, and maybe give a week or two depending on the size of your infrastructure landscape, and then look at the audit results, and then start turning on block mode in certain areas in batches. And also you can play a combination of mix and match, that what where it should be blocked and where it should not be blocked, right? So that's about how do we utilize ASR rules. Now let me also try to get some another things over here, if I may look at the documentation real quick. And I'm gonna bring up a screen here. And as I was talking about, let's say you are preparing for some demo, right? You absolutely may not need to set up Intune or GPU and things like that. And you see all the ASR rules are having a PowerShell command. And it's the same command, add MP preference. Only thing is you change the rule ID and that changes. If you and it also says that which rule ID belongs to what rule, right? So, and there are sample script and sample scenarios wherein you can test and deploy and things like that, right? As I was talking about, or the unassigned USB thing, right? USB blocking can also be another rule or available here, which is just right now available, right? So with that said, I think I'll just give it to Bignish, and at the same time, I'll also like to have any questions if you have.
All right. So thanks for the detailed demo, Samik. I'll just go back to my slides once again. Just a couple of things which I wanted to show. Um, so, folks, I hope with the detailed demo which Samik walked you through, you are able to make sense out of what attack surface reduction can offer, and what it can do. What do you mean by an audit mode? What do you mean by a block mode? How do you configure the ASR rules and stuff like that, right? Because of course it is a small demo environment, so we were able to just go ahead with that. But in a real production environment, you got to be cautious with what you're doing. As Samik was saying, always make sure that you turn the audit mode first. Understand how things are happening in your environment, see what people are doing, see what gets reported, and then in phases, I would say go ahead and turn on the block mode. Because if at all you're going to directly go ahead and turn on block mode, it's simply going to be chaos and you're going to attract a lot of service desk incidents or calls, and you do not really want to be in such shape, right? So, and speaking about some useful links, so if at all you're interested to deep dive and understand more about attack surface reduction, so here's the link. I'm putting it in the chat. I would request all of you to go through it, try to understand in detail about attack surface reduction capabilities, and start playing around with this in your demo environment, right? So with that, thanks a lot, folks. I think we were able to finish well ahead of time today's session. Thank you so much for being patient. So the next session would be once again on Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. Maybe on the next session we'll be not maybe we are going to be talking in detail about the Plan 2 capabilities, right? Because in the including this session and the previous session, we briefly talked about the Microsoft Defender for Endpoint Plan 1 capabilities. And as I said, if you haven't got a chance to see the previous session, please go back to my YouTube channel and make sure that you view the recording there. This session is more for attack surface reduction, which you just saw. And on the part 3 session, we'll try to talk in detail about the Plan 2 capabilities. Maybe we'll try to do 2 sessions in that, and then we'll move on to Microsoft Defender for Identity, right? And the next session is planned on 29th June at 6 p.m. IST. So with that, now would be the time for questions. So if at all you have any questions, either I would well suggest that you put it on the chat, or if at all you want to voice over your questions, please unmute and voice over your questions. And please take a moment to scan this QR code and give your feedback. And if at all you have any questions, please feel free to put that also in the form so that we can pick up the questions and discuss in detail about that in the next session, right? Thanks a lot once again, and now would be the time for questions. So please start bringing up your questions. Thank you.